Good morning, everybody. We are going to get started. It is that time. I want to thank everybody for joining me today. My name is Jennifer Morse. I'm the Director of Product Evangelism here at MadCap Software. And today's session is going to be an overview of Central and, of course, what's new in the July 2019 release. So we've got a lot to cover today. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. A couple items of business, though, that I want to cover. As always, this webinar will be recorded, and so we are in the process of recording this one. So if for whatever reason you have to pop out early, that's okay. We're going to send everybody a link to the recording when it's done. Another thing I want to mention, there is a question panel in the GoToWebinar console. Use this as a place to jot down questions. If for whatever reason you can't hear me or see my screen right now, go ahead and use that question panel to give me the hi sign, and we'll do our best to help you behind the scenes. But hopefully you can hear me okay, and you can see me okay, at least virtually. Hopefully you can see my screen. So quick agenda before we jump in. So pretty straightforward. Again, today is all about an overview of MadCap Central. What is it and what challenges can it help solve? I'm also going to be showing the features we've added in the July 2019 release of Central as we go through this overview. So that includes the ability to get translation quotes. We're going to touch on some additional security options that we've added and some user management improvements. So that's our plan today. But first of all, let's start out with some of the basics, okay? What is MadCap Central? So MadCap Central is a cloud-based platform that we developed that lets you plan, track, manage certain processes, your Flare content, and the teams that are responsible for producing documentation. And why did we build this thing? Well, we've been at this for a while, as many of you know, and over the course of time, our Flare users, our customers, have been letting us know about problems they've been running into with their documentation. So workflow challenges, technological challenges, and so on. And so we know that not all of these problems are things that Flare can solve on its own as a desktop tool. So for example, source control, this is a biggie, okay? Teams of writers need an easy to use version control solution that everybody can use. Even if you're a lone writer, source control is essential. Maybe you don't have anything, but maybe you have something in place in terms of a source control solution and you don't like it. And the thought of getting everything set up from IT, getting resources available to get things going, or perhaps switched in a different direction can feel daunting. So this is an area where Central can help. With literally a couple clicks of a button, Flare authors can have instant source control with Central and can easily collaborate. Task management is another area where we've developed Central to help. So when we built this out, we wanted to observe, how do people work? How do they keep track of all of the things they have to do to get content out the door? Think of when you've got a software release or some kind of release that requires a documentation update. You're trying to get content out the door to your customers. Could be a knowledge base, a help system, even a policy procedure manual, training content. Well, there's more to it than just writing content. There's often many processes you have to follow. Maybe you have to research the new feature that's being developed. Maybe based on that feature, you have to edit existing content in your body of knowledge. Maybe you do, in fact, have to write new topics to support this new feature. And if you write those new topics, did you remember to add them to the TOC? Did you remember to add concept links? Did you send it out for review? Has it been translated? So there's all these little milestones that have to happen sometimes when we're trying to get new content out the door. And we observed folks using all kinds of things to keep track of what they have to do to manage the documentation process. We saw large spreadsheets that were manually built with manual milestones. They looked so complicated, manually keeping track of every single file in the project. We observed teams that had sticky notes posted on their walls within their cubes. We saw some folks that had all this amazing knowledge lodged in their brains and they didn't share processes with anybody. So Central offers a really easy to use task board that authors can use to keep on track, and also very detailed project level checklists so that you know where you are and what things have to happen in order to get content out the door. Another thing, the browser-based review workflow. Now, getting subject matter experts involved is an area that's been challenging. So we offer a tool, or we still do offer it, a tool called MadCap Contributor as a way to fold in subject matter experts into the review process. But we often heard it was challenging to get SMEs to install and use another piece of software. From what I've observed, SMEs can come in a lot of different skill sets. You may have some SMEs on your team that are really technical. You may have some SMEs on your team that maybe don't, know how to turn on track changes in Word. So it's really is very different across the board at times. So even though Contributor was designed to be a scaled down Flare, essentially like a Flare Lite, it was still different. It still meant we had to install something and learn a new UI as an SME. Well, this new review workflow with Central means that your subject matter experts can review your source topics in a web browser and edit them using an extremely simple, and it's simple on purpose, a simple lightweight editor that's browser-based. So we keep the power of Flare as a desktop tool for the content authors. And now we pair it with this easy to use browser-based editor so we can get that feedback from the SMEs. A couple other ones I want to mention here: build management and content hosting. One challenge that we've often heard is that folks want to make it really easy to build their projects programmatically. Maybe they don't want to purchase additional build servers or build licenses of Flare. Well, when Central can see our projects, we can easily schedule builds so that perhaps as a team, when we check in all of our changes at the end of the day, Central will build our targets at 1 a.m. So when we come in the morning and we log in, we've got fresh websites, PDFs to review, etc. So we can manage that all ourselves and be self-reliant. We don't have to rely on IT for that. And then content hosting, again, kind of like source control. It may be kind of challenging if you don't have resources readily available to get a web server set up quickly. Once we build our content, that's pretty easy, but we want to make it available to our end users to see and consume. So with literally like one click of a button, we can set our targets to live, our HTML5 sites, PDFs, what we're building, so that our customers can access them. And we can use a vanity URL if we want to brand that URL that people are seeing in terms of accessing the site. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So again, sometimes folks still like to host their content on their own web servers. That's fine. Central makes this really easy to do so that you don't have to rely on IT to get that going. And then the last new thing, of course, as I mentioned, it's one of the new features that we put into this release is translation management. We have a way of starting that translation process, very easy to do in Central, when Central can see our projects, and I'll show you what that looks like, where we can get an analysis and a quote turned around quickly to understand what it's going to cost and how long is it going to take to get our targets quickly translated. So that's a little bit about what it is and why we built it. So I'm going to put PowerPoint away for just a moment. Okay, and I'm going to bring up Central so we can take a look at that. Okay, let's wait for GoTo to catch up. All right, so I've got MadCap Central open. Again, it is a browser-based program. So what happens is if you wanted to test this in your own environment, you would sign up for a trial on our website. You'll get an email, and the email says, hey, thanks for trying this out. Click here to create a password. And when you click that link to create your password, you're going to log into your own secure Central site for testing and for using. You'll know you're logged in because you're going to come to this home page here. You're going to see your name on the upper right-hand side, and you'll see your license label. This is whatever you filled in on the form. You can change that, but that's how you know you're logged in. You'll see this site sort of staring back at you. Now, my home page happens to have what are called dashboard widgets configured. When you first log in, there won't be any widgets available on the screen. There'll be some instructions that tell you how to add dashboard widgets. Widgets are just little information objects that tell us a little bit about what's happening in Central. Everybody's idea of what's important to them is a little different, so everybody's dashboard is going to look a little bit different. We can add widgets by using this little button up here in the home toolbar. and we can choose the various information widgets we want to drop in. Each widget has a little gear here. So when you want to configure your widget, when you drop it in, it's going to be empty, but you can use this little gear to configure what you want it to do. So I want to do a little bit of work in Central first, and if we have some time at the end, I can spend some time on these widgets. But again, they're just these little information objects to tell us something that's happening, tasks coming due, checklists, what builds are live and what URL are you using? Do we have any critical issues that we need to fix, like broken links or undefined variables, etc. So again, a little bit of data in your face, so to speak. So everybody's idea of what's important to them may be a little different. So you can configure these to meet your needs. So a little bit about the home screen. On the left-hand side, you're going to see some pages here. So we've got home, projects, tasks, reviews, teams, users. So there's not a rule that says that you have to necessarily start with any particular area here over on the left. You'll find as you tinker with this is that these things are somewhat interrelated. Projects and reviews kind of talk to each other. So you'll see these things kind of intertwining. A really good place to start is the users page, particularly if you're the lone author, that's fine. But if you're going to be inviting other folks to your license, the users page is a really good place to begin. So I'm going to select the users page. So what we see here, now this is a central license that I set up as a trial. I went ahead and I've invited a number of folks to my license. We have a couple different seat types in Central, as you can see here. We can see a bunch of folks invited and their seat types. There are two types, as I mentioned. There are author seats and there are SME seats. When you want to bring folks onto your license and invite them to participate, what you do is you click this little button up here, which is Add New User. You get a nice tooltip. Pretty straightforward. I'm going to put in their first name, last name, and email. And then I'm going to tell Central what type of person are they going to be, what seat are they going to be using? Are they going to be authors or are they going to be subject matter experts? Generally, Flare users are going to be authors in Central. Those on your team that aren't going to be using Flare but need to review your source topics and help you maybe edit them or give you comments or feedback, you're going to want to invite those folks as SMEs. And you'll see what that experience. I'm going to show you that review cycle here in just a minute. But when you invite folks as an SME, their experience in Central is a little bit different. When they log into Central, they're not going to see all of these functional areas here on the left. Only authors see all of these pages. When one gets invited as a subject matter expert and they log in, all they're going to see is this reviews page here. So I'll show you that in just a moment. So one of the new features that we added in this latest release in July is the ability to bulk invite subject matter experts. We had the ability to bulk invite authors in the past. Well, now we've extended that to SMEs. So this is just nice because you don't have to go through and individually add users here. We can bring them all in one fell swoop. It just saves a little bit of time. We also provided a template that you can use because in order to do a bulk invite, you just create a simple CSV file, first name, last name, email, save it, point to it, and that's going to bring in a bunch of folks all at once. So it's just a bit of a time saver. What we did is we provided a template that you can download so that you don't even have to create your own CSV if you don't want to. So again, we wanted to make it a little bit easier. We're providing that bulk invite template, free to use, fill out, bring everybody in. So expanding that bulk invite to the subject matter experts and providing that download template is something that we've just added. Now, one thing I want to point out, when you're the first person to log into Central, you're going to be the only person on this grid. So, and if you've signed up for it, you're going to have a little crown next to your avatar. See how I've got a little crown here? We've got a couple people with crowns on the list. That means you're a user administrator. That means you have the superpowers in your Central license. And when you have that crown, that means that you can invite people. So you can go through that exercise that I just showed you of adding users to the license, doing that bulk invite. You also have the power to set permissions for those authors that you bring in. So Central is very permissions based, so we can kind of control what people can and can't do in this thing. And I'll show you what I mean. I'll just go ahead and pull up one of my teammates here. So when we go into somebody's user card, like we're seeing here, there's this permissions page. So as an admin, you have the ability to elevate one's permissions, and you can give another person administrative permissions. We can set those permissions globally, or we can set them on a per project basis, depending on what project what projects this user is associated with. So we can control these permissions even on a project level if we want to. So I won't go through all of these, but you do get nice little tooltips to say what these permissions mean. So again, you can control what users can and can't do, and the admin has the ability to do that. And once again, if you have somebody else on your team that wants to be an admin, well, then you can do that as well. So a little bit about the users and the permissions there. Let's talk a little bit about one other option while we're on the subject of users and things and permissions. One of the permissions that you can give somebody is server management positions. And I'll show you where that is, because that ties into one of the other features that we released last month. So up here on your name, which is right, we go up here to the upper right-hand side. If I select settings, and I go into this license tab here, we have this security tab. And so one of the things we've done here is we've given you some options that give you more control over some of the security aspects of your license. So this includes the ability to have maximum login attempts. There are some automatic logout settings, as you can see, and also password change requirements. So you need to have that server management permission in order to edit some of these things, but this is something that we've just added in this release. So for the login attempts allowed, if a user, you can set this so that if a user exceeds the maximum number of login attempts, that person's going to be logged out going to be logged out for 5 minutes. And after that, the user can try again, or they can click forgot password. There's also the logout after idle 4 option. So if there's a lack of activity on Central, a user will see a warning message when a minute is left. So after that time expires, the user will be logged out and they'll be prompted to log back in again. And you can also set the require password change. So starting 2 days before the expiration, if you chose to set this, users will see a reminder that their password is going to expire. So it'll prompt them to create a new one. Users can skip it and continue on with the old one until the very final day, at which time they have to set it, or else they won't be able to log in. So some additional security options here. And again, as I mentioned, you need the right server management permission in order to set some of these things. Okay, put that away. All right, so the translation. This is the other big new feature that we've added in the July 2019 release. So with the translation feature, and I'll probably mention this again when we come back and talk about projects, what this is allowing us to do, this page lets us quickly obtain a quote for translating our Flare projects and also other files. And so this quote is going to originate from our Mad Translations team. So for those of you who don't know, we have a wholly owned subsidiary called Mad Translations, which is part of our company. And that's a team of our very talented, very knowledgeable translation experts. So we have project managers, we have translators that run that. And so what we're doing here is we're providing a really easy way for you to get an analysis and a quote of projects and targets that you need to get translated. And we wanted it to be really, really easy. So here, we haven't talked about projects yet. We're going to get there in a second. But this is showing me all of the active projects that I've got cloned up on Central. And so here I can choose, do I want an entire project to be translated? Or I can select that box. Or if I expand this here, I can just say, well, maybe I just need the training manual translated. So I can choose everything in the project, or I can just segment out what target outputs I want to have translated. So these represent our target files in our Flare project. Once we've made our selections over here, we can tell the form a source language. Now the source language isn't required because we'll be able to get that when we get your files for analysis. But if you want to set the source language, you can. We do need to know your target languages. So perhaps we need to have this translated into Spanish, and perhaps French, maybe French Canadian and French France, a little bit different. We can specify a due date, when we would like to have everything done. We can add some text, some sort of description. So if there's something that you'd like to let us know, be aware of, certain questions or concerns that you have, you can type all of that in here. And then if you have additional files that you want to have analyzed and have a quotation provided, maybe some UI files, some ResX files, or some Word documents or XML files. We can translate lots of things. We're not limited to just translating Flare projects. So our team has experience translating all kinds of things. So we don't discriminate. If you have other files that you need to have analyzed, you can zip them up and attach that zip file here. And then just a little bit of, T's and C's. We want to just let you know that your privacy, your security is super important to us. And so you can review the terms agreement here if you like, our privacy policy, just letting us know that we're not going to share, we're letting you know we're not going to share any of your information to anybody on the outside, and that we're keeping all your content secure and private. Once everything's been received, you're going to get an email confirmation letting you know that everything went through. And within 2 business days or less, you're going to get an email back or perhaps a phone call from your project manager to run through any questions that came up, or you simply could get that analysis and quote back. Now, that doesn't mean you have any kind of, you're not bound to moving forward with anything. You're not obligated on the quote. It's just a really easy way to get an idea of, hey, if I'm going to be starting crossing that translation bridge, what are we looking at? What kind of time is it going to take? What's the cost? Or if you're working with an existing LSP, perhaps you want to get an alternate quote and see what the turnaround time and some of the competitive pricing may be. You can do this too. So it just takes you don't have to package anything up or think about what to send. Central's just going to make it really easy to do it for you. So a little bit about the new translation page that we've added to Central in this release. So moving on a little bit here, let's talk about some of these other functional areas, and then I want to definitely get to the review workflow. I want to talk about tasks. So the task board, what this is a view. It's an active board that all authors can see, and these are high-level tasks that we as authors and Central, we can create tasks for ourselves. We can also create tasks for other authors in Central. So tasks can be high level. They can be reminders. They can be a way to divvy out, who's working on documenting what feature. I know our doc team uses that a lot. When we've got releases coming and we've got different features that are being documented, they use this as a way to kind of iron out, okay, well, I'm going to document this, you're going to document that, etc. So it's a nice way to keep things on track. When we create tasks, they can be in 3 states here on the active board. They can be in to do, they can be in progress, or they can be completed. Creating tasks, really easy. There's a little plus button up here in the toolbar. When I select this guy, I can fill out this form. I can give the task a title. I can give it a priority if I want to. I can give it a start date and an end date. I can assign this task to myself. So right now, if I were to just keep going and filling out this task card, this would be assigned to me. But here I can select anybody, any author on my license can get this task. I can put in a description. So this can be text. It can be links to something. So if you need to create a link in here to TFS or Jira or something else, we can put any kind of content in this little description box. And then we can also, if we want to, add attachments. So perhaps you want to add notes. Maybe you have a Word document from a meeting. You can attach that Word file or a PDF file. Maybe you have a CSS file that you coded for one of your other teammates. You can attach that CSS file. So we can attach any kind of file to the task. A little bit different than reviews. We're going to talk about reviews different. These are just high-level tasks that we're assigning to everybody. Okay, so once, and you can add a comment if you want to, if you have a dialogue going back and forth with the person you're creating that task with. So once this is all done and you click save, if you had created this task for someone else, they would be notified. There's a few ways of getting notifications in Central. Let me go ahead and cancel this for a moment. We do have this little notification center up here. So you have some choices into how you configure these notifications. Little notification will light up if something happened in the system, like a new task was created or a task was moved from in progress to completed. All these little dials can be configured in your setup, in terms of what's important to you. You can also choose to have those notifications come through email, and many notifications you can set up to come through Slack. So if any of you are using Slack for your internal corporate communications, you can configure those things to come through those private Slack channels if you want. So everybody's a little bit different. We try to give you some choices. So so we've got some active tasks here. Now, one thing that you'll notice, mine's not too bad, but as time evolves, you'll end up with kind of a lot of things happening on your task board, because this is everybody's. All of the authors, when they come to tasks over here on the left, they're going to see everybody's task cards, and it can start to look a little bit busy. What I like to do, we do give you the ability to toggle between seeing what everybody's working on, but also your own stuff. So up here on the upper left, I can toggle and just focus on my tasks. What have I created for myself, and what have others created for me to do? So I find this great, because now I can really hone in and focus. And if I need to get the details of what a particular task is, I can click on it, and there's not much going on here, but I could create, if somebody had created this task for me, maybe they've got some descriptive text for me, perhaps there's an attachment, I can review the details of the task. So it's all here for me. And when I want to start moving a task through its life cycle, if I want to start working on this guy, redo the what's new topic, I can just drag that task card over into the in progress column. Now, if somebody had created that task for me, and if they chose to be notified when these things change, they'll get a notification that, hey, Jen moved this task from to do to in progress. So we can just keep working through our tasks, moving these task cards through their life cycle until they're done. Now, if we want to keep our active task board tidy, when you're totally done and completed with tasks, we can move them into the archive. So what that does, go ahead and move that into the archive. It moved it off the active board, but it put it into this archive bucket here. So what this does is, if we're not deleting anything, we may want to save the details. Here's this guy. What did we talk about? What did we go back and forth on? What did we attach? We can keep the details of our conversation and what we decided on and all of our attachments. We're just not looking at it every day. So, when you're done with last year's tax returns, you don't want to necessarily throw that paperwork away. We want to stick it up in the attic in a banker's box. That's kind of what the archive is here. We can get to it if we need to. And then we've also got this notion of a backlog. Perhaps in the active board here, maybe this is something that's a great idea, but maybe it became super low priority. We don't really need to focus on this right now. Well, we don't want to delete it, because it may become something that we do need to pay attention to in the future. Maybe it's a feature that got tabled for the next release. So we don't want to delete all the details, but if we want, we can move it into the backlog bucket. So moving something into the backlog is kind of like setting something in park. We're saying, you know what, it's important, but not right now. So let's get it off that active board so that we're not looking at it. And when we want to, we can come to that backlog bucket and review those things that we've set on the back burner, and perhaps breathe a little bit of life back into those tasks, move them back into that to-do column whenever we want, just simply by clicking on it and then moving it back to to-do whenever it's appropriate to do so. Okay. So he's off the backlog now, back to the board it goes. So we can move these things around as we see fit. So a little bit on tasks there. Now, the next thing I want to transition to, I want to talk a little bit about projects. This is part of the powerhouse of Central here. So I've just selected the projects page over here on the left. So what we're looking at here is a list of all of the projects that we've copied or cloned up in our Central license. So Central is never replaces Flare as our main authoring environment. It's working with Flare. Central needs to see our projects so that we can do fun things in here. We can do reviews, we can schedule builds, we can host content live if we want to, or we can run just private staged builds among authors if we want. So in order to do all those things, and also get translation quotes, Central has to see our projects in order to do them. So one of the things, as I mentioned in the beginning, Central is also a source control repository. So that's the other thing it's doing. When we bind our projects to Central, we're creating a repository of our source Flare projects that were once only local on our desktop machine. And that way other authors can easily collaborate on the same project, and we're using Central as a source control repository. Now, I don't have time to go into too much on the details of the source control side. I will just say this one thing, is that we can use Central as our primary source control provider. Central uses Git under the hood as the source control. So you'll see, I'm going to bind a Flare project to Central here in a second. You're going to see all that Git terminology. So if you've ever used Git in the past or you're familiar, some of those terms are going to look familiar to you when I show this to you in Flare. But there may be times when you may not want to use that as your primary source control provider. So we do give that one source control tool in play, MadCap Central, that's fine, but we do offer what's called a dual bound approach, where maybe you do need to use a different source control system. Maybe you love your version, maybe you love your setup of TFS or SVN or your own instance of Git, and you don't want to change that process. Well, we don't make you change that process. You can be what's called dual bound. You can continue to do all of your work in your primary source control provider, and then you can have a secondary sync in Central so that Central can see your projects, you can use it for reviews, etc. So we don't make you cut the cord if you don't want to. You can be dual bound. We've got some good information in the documentation and some fun little tutorials and movies on our website that talk about that process and how it works. So two options: single bound, one source control tool in play, which is Central, or dual bound, which we've got two. Maybe TFS or your own version of Git or Subversion or Perforce, that's fine. You can do both. What I'm going to be showing today is a single bound approach. So I'm not going to have any other source control tool in play. And so when we want to get our projects cloned or copied up here, we don't actually do this from the Central UI. We do it from the Flare interface. So I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to bring up Flare for just a moment. And we're going to walk through that process so I can show you how easy it is to get it up there and be self-reliant, to get it bound and have instant source control. Okay, so I've got Flare open. Hopefully this looks familiar to some of you here. And what I'm going to do, this is local to my machine, by the way. I don't have this bound to anything. I don't have anybody else working on this project with me. Up here in my ribbon, I don't have any kind of version control going on here. But what we want to do is get it up there. So if I've got my Central license all configured, I've got users invited, etc. When I go over to this view ribbon in Flare, I've got this button here for MadCap Central. Okay, so if I select this button, oops, it's already logged me in, you're going to come to this little helper window that's going to open on the left-hand side of the Flare interface. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to log into Central from Flare using that credential, or the credentials I created when I first signed up for that Central license or that trial. Okay, so I'm going to use my username, which is going to be your email. Generally, it's always going to be your email. And then you're going to create that, or you're going to type in that password that you created. So whatever password you're using to log into the Central on your browser. I didn't mistype it here. All right, so I know I'm logged in because I can see my name, my email, and my funny little avatar that I created in my Central profile shows up here for me, so I know I'm successfully logged in. I also have additional buttons up here at the top, these little helper buttons available to me now. The first thing we want to do is, if we don't have a project up on Central, if it's not cloned yet, then we have to go through this exercise once. We got to get it up there. There's a little button here, looks like the end of an electrical plug. When I hover, I get a nice tooltip. It says upload this project to MadCap Central, and that's what I want to do. So I'm going to start this little binding exercise here. So I first want to bind my project. You're going to select your MadCap Central license. Now, I happen to be part of a couple licenses internally for testing. So when you'll see there's this drop down here. Well, if you're testing and using Central, you'll probably only see one license here. Usually that's the case. So I've got a little drop down. I'm going to choose the license I want to bind to. But again, you may only see one there if you've only got one trial. You'll want to enter a Flare project name. By default, it's going to grab whatever you've named your project. So this is called Central Demo. You can change this if you want. This is just the label that's going to show up on that projects page in Central. So you can change it, and then optionally you can give it a description too. I'm I'm going to click OK. Okay, so now it's going through this bind exercise routine. It's taking this local project and making a clone of it in Central. So we get bind successful, and that's it. Like 2 clicks of a button, maybe 3 there with the OK button. I'm bound, I'm connected. I've got instant source control. Notice that I've got this new source control ribbon right up here available to me in the Flare UI. So you'll see push and pull. This is all coming from the Git stuff. So now I'm bound. I've got my Git source control all set up and ready to go. Now I'm working on this here on just me, but what if I've got somebody else on my team who also has a license of Flare who needs to help me author this project? They don't have a copy of this project yet, but they need it because I need them to help me author this thing. So what they're going to do, if they've been invited to Central as a user, they've already authenticated, one of those authors on your license, they're going to go to that view ribbon. They're going to log into MadCap Central just like we did together. But when they log in and they get this MadCap Central helper window that opens, they're not going to use this guy here because the project's already uploaded. What they're going to want to do is choose this button, import a project from MadCap Central. And this is going to show kind of a similar little couple windows that we just saw. They'll choose their Central license, and then they'll be presented with a list of all of the projects on Central that they're associated with. And that gives them the ability to pull down the most local, the most up-to-date version of that file. So you only have to do that once. Once you pull down that version from Central and you've got it, you're working on sort of that local copy. And then as 2 authors or 3 authors or however many you have, you all can be working in sync. You'll be working like you would in a typical Git environment, staying in sync. You'll be pushing and pulling, adding comments to your commits perhaps, and getting everything synced up to Central. So Central's playing traffic cop. It's that source control repository for you. So if you shut down Flare at the end of the day and you open it back up, Flare knows that project is bound. So you won't have to go through that exercise of pulling down the project. You'll just be prompted, hey, do you want to pull the most current version of the project? So that's how we work together and collaborate. Very easy. Don't need to get IT involved. Get it cloned up there. In fact, if we pop back over to Central, let me go back to my license here. If I refresh my page, there's that project that I just cloned. So now, I can say I knew it was successful, but we can see it here from the list. And now we can do various things in Central too. So back to Flare though, before we talk about projects in Central. Now that we've got it bound, okay, as authors, we're working away. We're staying in sync. We're pushing and pulling all day. We're working on the guts of this Flare project. We're managing the single source of truth. What if we have to invite some ancillary folks on our team, or some folks that aren't using Flare to help us review some of these files, help us write them, edit them, give us some feedback? Well, now that Central can see it, we can initiate a review process or this review workflow. There's a review button here in Flare, so I'll go ahead and select it. And what I can do, now that Central can see it, if I want, I can start sending files out for review. There is a button over here on the very far left called Send for Review. I'll go ahead and click it. And I'm presented with this window that says, select the files you want to send. Now I happen to have this getting started one in focus, so it automatically put it on the list. But I can use this little plus button to add additional folders of files or snippets to be reviewed here. One thing I want to point out, speaking of snippets, I don't have any in this topic, but snippets are those reusable chunks of content that we insert into our topics by reference. And they're separate XML files in our Flare project. So what's cool about this workflow is if your topic that you're sending for, or topics that you're sending for review happen to have snippets in them, you don't have to think about adding those snippets on here. Flare's smart enough to grab those snippet files and add them as different file types for review. So if I had 2 snippets in this topic, you'd see 2 snippet files in this list as well. We do give you the ability though, and this is a personal choice on the part of the author. If you feel like those snippets are going to be a little bit too much for your reviewer and you don't want them to have to manage or think about those extra files, any file that gets listed here, whether it's a topic or a snippet, you can multi-select from this list and hit X and remove them. So the good news is if you tell this review package here, hey, get rid of these snippet files, when our reviewer gets the topic or topics for review and the snippets are gone, they're not going to be left with any kind of blank box. That the snippet content will be included in the lightweight editor, so they can view the snippet text in context. They just won't have an extra file to manage or think about to review and submit. So that's totally up to you in terms of how much editing power you want to give your SMEs when it comes to those snippets that are making up our topic. So I've got my topic here. Down here, Flare knows that it's bound to Central, so it's assuming I want to send it there for review. So that's automatically selected. This is the contributor way. So it's still supported. So if we wanted to send this set of files out as a contributor package, we could. But we're not talking about that today. We're going to use Central this time around and not use contributor. So I'm going to use Central. I'm going to click Next. And I'm presented with a list of all of my users that I've invited to my license. We can ask not only SMEs, those subject matter experts, to review our files, but we can ask authors too. So perhaps you have a, maybe a manager or a set of managers on your team. Maybe one of them is away. They don't have, their computer with them, but maybe they're on vacation and they're just, they got their big iPad or maybe a Mac or something, and they're catching up on all their shows. If you wanted to bug them on vacation, you could. If they're a user in your license, you can invite them to review any files, and all they need is an internet connection and a web browser to see it. They don't need Flare. They don't need anything installed. So we can ask any of these folks on this list to review and edit this topic or set of topics. I'm going to cheat though. Tim is invited as an SME on my license. I have Tim's login. I can log in as Tim. So I'm going to choose him to review this file because I want you to see that SME experience also. But just know I can ask anybody on this list to review the file. We don't have to do it one at a time in daisy chain files around the table. We can have multiple people reviewing the same file at the same time. So I'm going to click Send. And I get this little progress here, and I'm going to let GoToWebinar catch up. So it says, files have been sent for review on MadCap Central. Right at that moment, Tim got an email that said, you have files for review? Click here to view them. And when he clicks that link, because he's already been invited as an SME, he's already authenticated, a browser window is going to open, and he's going to see this. It says, review your topics here, select a file from the left to get started. I know I'm logged in as Tim because here's my name here on the upper right. Here's that license that we're all logged into. One thing on the left I want you to notice, because Tim was invited as an SME, notice he doesn't have all those functional areas in his central view. The only thing he can see are reviews. And so he's got this pending column here. This is going to represent all the files and all the topics, I should say, that he's been asked to review. So there's that getting started topic. I'll go ahead and select it. And that topic loads in what's called our lightweight editor here in Central. So it's lightweight on purpose. It's not meant to look like Flare or feel like Flare. It's meant to make it as easy as possible for folks to get you comments and edits and reviews. We're trying to keep it simple and remove some of that complexity. So very basic formatting up here in terms of heading level styles and paragraphs. This map back to your style sheet. Basic numbered and bulleted lists that can be mapped back. But as a subject matter expert, if I come in here, or even an author if I was invited, if I want to start editing, it's just like kind of an email that you're using Gmail for. So I can start typing here. Oops, if I could spell correctly. Step 3 goes here. Okay, so I'm typing my content. Notice that as I'm typing, my change is tracked over here on the right-hand side. Okay, so if I hover over my initials, it's kind of nice. You get an email. In case it's nice to know, like, well, what email is that person? And if you forget their initials, you can get their full email there. So we can come in here and keep typing. Really basic formatting, as I mentioned. Maybe I know a little bit about structure. If I click on here, I get a little tag information. It's not as scary as looking at XML tags. But if I decide, maybe I think that should be a heading 2, I can select heading 2 from that formatting toolbar up there. Notice that my old one crosses out, the new heading 2 gets dropped in. All of my changes are tracked over here on the side. If I want to add a comment or an annotation, I can. Maybe I want to make a comment on this line item. I could say this is awesome, whatever it is, or maybe it's wrong, whatever the comment is. So you don't necessarily have to edit anything. You can just add comments if you want to. And by the way, any comments you make in your Flare topic, if you're one of those who uses the annotation feature in Flare, if you add an annotation in your Flare topic and you send it out for review, it's going to show up here for your reviewers. They'll see those annotations on here. You want to give them a little comment or something to get them started. So those get preserved as we go back and forth. So when we're done, we've made our edits, we've given our contribution to this file. As a reviewer, the only thing I have to do is click this green submit button. Now, before I do, I want to point out one thing. Over here on the right, I can see who sent this to me, first of all, and this is going to show me a list of everybody who was invited to review that file. SMEs, authors, whoever you asked to review. Right now, of course, I only asked him. Notice that the review status says open. That means we haven't submitted any changes yet. But once I click that green submit button, that's going to change to completed, okay? So it's completed, and as an author, this is great because I can log into Central. I can go to my reviews page. In fact, let me go ahead and do that right now. I'll show you. Let me go back to myself because I have access to reviews. As authors, we have an extra tab. So SMEs only have pending, submitted, and archived. But as an author, we always have this extra tab. This sent tab is showing us all of the files that are out for review. So you can see what state they're in. So here was that file Tim was just looking at. Okay, we can see that it's completed. This is kind of nice. If you did ask multiple folks to review, we know who's got it open and who's got it completed. Who has not done what I've asked them to do? You know, who do you need to give a gentle nudge to remind them that you've got reviews to do? You can do that. You can easily see. But when that last person on the list clicks that green submit button, as an author, you get notified. So in that notification, it's pretty simple. It just says reviews are done. Click here to view them. It'll actually log you right into Central and into this sent items here, and you'll actually you'll be able to go through all of the files that have come back, and you can see everything here. You can make simple edits in the lightweight editor if you want to as an author. You can add text in here if you want. That's not a problem, okay? You don't have to if you don't want to. So we can go in here and make little edits. And then at some point, however, we need to resolve these changes back in Flare. So the process starts and ends in Flare with the author, but we need to replace that old getting started with this new one and make it part of our single source of truth. And again, we do that back in the Flare interface. So I'll switch back to Flare. My subject matter experts are done with their reviews. I got that notification. I made some simple edits in here. So back to Flare we go. Well, this was the one we sent out, if you recall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up another helper window. In this review tab here, so if you're using Central, I'll go ahead and refresh this. There is a helper tab that's going to open, or helper window, I should say, that normally just docks itself on the left-hand side that I would encourage you to have open often. So from the review tab here, we can see there's this file reviews. This is going to help us see all the files that are coming and going from Central. And it looks like I've got a little bit of a GoToWebinar delay, so I'm waiting. Looks like you're caught up and you're now seeing what I'm seeing. But on the left-hand side, this is that file that came back from my reviewer. It says submitted. I want to get to that file. I want to start resolving some of those changes. So I'll double click on it. This is Flare prompting me to move it out of that submitted state and closing it. So when we close that file, I'll go ahead and click OK. When we close the file in Central, it just moved it from that submitted bucket into an archive bucket that we have access to in Central. So we can always see the raw edits of that review lifecycle if we wanted to. We can see all these changes in Central. We can't edit anything, but if we wanted a bird's eye view or a snapshot of, well, what was actually submitted in terms of changes, we have it. We can see it in Central. So here it is in Flare though. And as an author, I need to come in here and accept and reject these things. And I can do this one by one. So I can accept them here just like I would in Word if I had track changes on. I also have some helper buttons up here where I can accept all and reject all. So I'm going to save a little bit of time. I'm just going to go ahead and accept all changes in my file. Want to point out annotations, they're going to hang out in your topic as metadata. They never get published out as part of your outputs. If you want to, you can keep them in there. There is an option when you generate Word and PDF. You have to explicitly enable this, but if you wanted to keep those annotations in, you could. They're never published out as part of your online output though. Nobody will ever be able to go splunking around and finding them. So you can keep annotations in here if you want to. You can, take the feedback, delete them if you want. If you want to keep them in there and not look at them, there's a little check mark box where it says show changes up here in the review ribbon. I can check that and they'll go away. We didn't delete them, we just turned them off. We're not looking at them. So you have some choices into how you want to see those things. Okay, so I'll go ahead and turn this off. Great feedback, but I'll go ahead and get rid of it. And then the last step in the process is I want to accept the file. Remember, we sent out that first one. This is going to be my new single source of truth here. This is the one that was sent out for review. So when I accept the file, I'll click OK. Now, where did it go? Well, as you know, our topics live in our Content Explorer. And there's that Getting Started topic. It's now come back for review. So now I can come in here and I can make additional changes to it. I can add my condition tags. I can rewrite what somebody's written. I can do whatever I want. And when I'm ready, because it's bound to Central, I can go ahead and synchronize. I can push my changes up to the repository so that all of my other authors have access to the most current version of that file. So we replace that old one with the new one. And of course, because we've got source control, we've all got all that historical data. We'll always be able to see how our files change over time, view the history of them, revert back to a different version of them if we wanted to. We have all that source control there behind the scenes doing that for us. So a little bit on the review workflow. Nobody had to install anything. We were just using a browser to edit. So we can be on any kind of operating system to do this. We don't have to daisy chain files around the table. We can ask multiple people to review that file at the same time, sort of like that Google Docs experience where, nobody's going to step on anybody's toes because all of our changes are being saved and tracked for us so we can see. And then when we're done, we can resolve them all in Flare and make that review those files that have been out for review part of our single source of truth. We still have control over them in the Flare interface. So a little bit about reviews there. Let's go back to Central. A little bit on projects. Let's go back here. So again, I mentioned these are all the projects that have been cloned up to my Flare license. I want to dig into another project that I've copied up here that looks a little cooler than that one. So I'm going to open up this project here called Balboa. It's one that I've cloned up to Central. Now, when you select a project, a dashboard loads. So there's two dashboards in Central. Each project has a dashboard that you can configure with these widgets that tell you something that's happening in this project. And of course, our home screen, as you saw, has a dashboard with those information objects. So you can build out these dashboards for individual projects if you want to as well, which I've done here. And this is the button right up here in the toolbar. Oops, come on, mouse. Right up here is where you can add additional dashboards, widgets, to the dashboard. But I want to talk a little bit about this guy. So I've got Balboa loaded here. If we come over to this Builds tab here, what we're looking at, this targets area, this is where we can start managing and setting builds to live if we want to. This targets pane, this is representing that targets folder in our Flare project. So if we were to go to your project organizer, you go down to that targets folder, whatever structure you've got going on in that folder is going to be represented here. So this Balboa project happens to have 3 target files in it. If I were to open up the targets folder of Balboa, that's what we see. If you have any folder structures in there, those would be preserved here. We'd have multiple folders that you could dig into to find your individual target files. It's gonna preserve what you've got in Flare. So if we look at one of these, I'll go into one of my targets. We can see I've built this a couple times. So we can build our targets right here in Central if we want to. Not only can we build it manually, we could kick off a build here if we want. It's very similar to kicking off a build in Flare, right? When you click the build button, same idea. We can also, though, schedule our builds. So maybe we want our targets to build at 1 a.m. Okay, we don't want to, deal with the command line. We don't want to buy an extra build license of Flare. We don't want to configure another server to do it. I can just come up here and say schedule build, and I can tell Central, you know what, build this target every night, and let's go ahead and build it at 1 a.m. and we'll build it at 1 a.m. Pacific time. Okay, there I am, Pacific time, save. So at the end of the day, when we push our changes to Central's going to say, oh, we've got fresh stuff, let's kick off a build. And when I come in the morning, I would see a fresh new row that would probably say started at 1 a.m. and finished 18 seconds later to review. So again, it keeps things tidy. It takes it off your local machines and allows you to be self-reliant to do these build schedules on your own if you want to, so that as a team, you can come in the morning and review these. Now, each build you do is kept. You can see, it's a little bit different than Flare. When you do a build, the previous target build is kind of wiped out of your temporary folder. We keep these builds here in Central, so you always have access to them because you may want to version these things if you want to. But each build you do, if I go ahead and expose this guy here, I just click that little arrow, we can see each build gets a private URL. If I select that URL, what we see is essentially a staged or a built, it's basically the target file. And it's private, meaning only authors that you've invited to your Central license can get access to this. So nobody can see this except other authors. So if you wanted to send this link to another author on your team, maybe you create a task for that person that says, hey, check out my new skin, what do you think? Put that link in the task. They can access this, so you don't have to get a staging server internally set up. The outside world can't see this at all. But what if we look at that build and we say, yep, that looks great. That could be a contender. Let's make that go live, okay? Well, we can set it to live if we want to. Setting it to live is as simple as clicking a button. So I'll click this button. Now you have to have a permission. Not everybody can do this. You have to have a permission in Central in order to set builds to live. So you can control who can do this. But when I click OK, notice that I've got this little globe here. And in addition to that private URL, I've got a live one. Okay, so this means if I select this link, if I were to put this in the chat window for you all, I'll go ahead and do it. Why not? Okay, so I put that link in there. Hopefully you all can see that in the chat that just came through. You can get access to this. We just turned something that was once only private live. So we could provide this link on our support website if we need to give folks access to our knowledge base, our documentation portal, our online help files. This is the link we can use. Now you may be looking at this vanity URL going, that looks kind of ugly. I don't know if I want some of that stuff in there. We can change many aspects of this. This is just the vanity URL that Central provides. Maybe we want to version this thing. Maybe this is version 1 of our help because it goes with version 1 of our product. Well, if I go back to Central, I may choose to give it a different vanity URL. Maybe I'll call this version 1. I can shorten it there if I want to. So this becomes version 1. Notice that my URL changed just a little bit. It got rid of that number string, which was just a target build identifier. So if I select it, it's not going to look any different, but the URL is a little bit different. This is version 1. Now, what about this stuff here? Well, we can change this. We can change this. This is just a license label. If we're using Central to host our output and we're just using the vanity URL Central provides, we need to keep that MC output. This part we can't change. But we can change this to be very descriptive, maybe our company name. We can version our builds. And why would you want to version your builds? Well, again, this may be associated with version 1 of your project. What if you make some changes in a few months and you build again and you want to make that new build version 2? Well, you can give that a different vanity URL. You can call that new build version 2. So now you've got a unique URL for version 1 and a unique URL for version 2. And so one thing you may want to think about doing if you're going to be using Central for hosting, let me go back to the settings here. There's another setting, include in search engines. What does this mean? Well, this means that, eventually Google's going to be indexing and spidering these files and finding your HTML files as search results in Google. You may choose to hide it from search engines. Maybe you don't want people to find it because, we do this. Our documentation is hosted on Central. We've got lots of versions of Flare. And we have folks maybe on version, we're on Flare 2019. Maybe you're still on Flare 2018 R2. Well, if you haven't upgraded to 19 and you click on help for Flare 2018 R2, we want you to see that version of help. So we don't necessarily take it down. We want it up there. But if you were to go out to Google and search for what's new in Flare, we don't want people finding the what's new in Flare 2018 topic. We want people finding the what's new in Flare 2019 topic. So hiding your builds from search engines can be helpful if you are versioning these things. It just ensures if you do want your documentation to be findable on Google, which can be really helpful as part of the sales process in your own company, then you can ensure that folks are finding the most current version of your docs, okay? So that's why we may want to hide it from search engines. It doesn't hide it entirely. If the link is still accessible, we can't prevent anybody from clicking on it if they have the link, but the search engines won't find it if we have that unchecked. So a little bit on builds, super easy to manage. Again, we don't have to involve IT. We can just set that content to live, and we've got a live URL to manage. Now, one other option in terms of the vanity URL, we talked about the things you could change, right? We can change that unique target number. We can version it if we want. We can change this license label if we want to. If you want to completely brand that URL, we do support that host mapping or that CNAME, where maybe you wanted to say help.madcapsoftware.com or documentation.madcapsoftware.com. We also support that as well. And I'll show you where that is. I won't go through the whole process, but just to kind of point you into the direction so you know it's there. Up on your name on the upper right-hand side, we'll go back into settings. We were here earlier when we talked about some of the security options that we added. Back to that license tab, there's a URL option here. And this is where we can change the elements of our URL. So right now, our label is MC Team. So I can change that to anything I want. This MC output would stay the same. And then we would have any kind of target vanity would show up after that. However, we can use this host map domain rather. So if we want to, we can use this instead. So if I wanted to say, docs.madcapsoftware.com or KB for knowledge base or portal or whatever it is we wanted to say, we can create this. Now, we do have to ensure that whatever domain we want to use is properly registered. So this is the one area of Central where you may have to ask your IT guys to ensure, or gals, to ensure that that host domain that you want to use is properly registered. It's not difficult though. And once you do that, you can validate it. And then the last step is to either use the MadCap generated SSL, or perhaps they want you to use their own SSL certificate. So they'll give you a PFX file, you use that, you'll upload it, you may need to put in a password, that's okay, and then click save. So what would happen at that point is your URL would change from mcteam.mcoutput.com/version1 to docs.madcapsoftware.com/version1 default.htm, whatever that entry point is to your home page of your HTML5 site or PDF. So if you don't want to use the one out of the box, we can use that CNAME so that it looks branded to your own company. Central's still serving it up, but the URL looks a little bit more branded to your own corporate requirements. A lot of good information in the help about doing that too, and we can always help you if you have questions about that on the support side. All right, so we talked a lot about Central in terms of an overview. I'm looking at the clock here, I'm a little bit over. So I do want to get to some questions, but we talked about binding projects and tasks. We talked about the review lifecycle, some of the improvements to user management in terms of bulk uploading SMEs to our license now and providing that template to make it easy to bulk upload authors and SMEs so you don't have to do it individually. Of course, the ability to get translation quotes quickly and easily from our Mad Translations team, and some of those additional security options to control idle behavior, how many password attempts, password change requirements, etc. And so with that, I want to do just a couple questions have come through. Would encourage you, of course, if there are any questions, we can take some of those. So go ahead and use that questions panel if you want. I do want to review one thing though, just as a friendly reminder, our Mad World conference is coming up in Dublin, Ireland in October. It's at a beautiful location, the Marker Hotel. There is a registration discount to save up to $400. And if you haven't registered, I believe there is a package that your sales rep can help you with. So get in touch with sales if you want a hotel and registration, a conference registration package. We do have those as well, but there is just a registration discount valid through August 31st. So the conference details are up there, also on our website. An amazing panel of educators and speakers is lined up. Amazing sessions to take your skills to the next level. So if you're able to join us in Dublin, we hope you can come if you haven't registered already. We'd be excited to see all of you there. Okay, so just a couple questions that have come in. Oh, not so much related to Central, but a good one anyways, just for anybody listening. Is there a mechanism for submitting Central enhancement requests? Absolutely. We can do that right from the drop down. And so, in fact, let me go back over there so you can see a couple different ways. So right up here, we can submit feedback right here. This is one way to do it. You can email us directly. You can email your sales rep. You can email sales@madcapsoftware.com. You can email me directly. I'll have my email up here shortly. Feel free to send me anything. I'd be happy to get it logged. But we'd love to hear from you. So if you have any ideas or suggestions, please send them our way. It's so helpful to get suggestions from folks because many of the features that we add come from your suggestions. So we welcome them. Please keep sending them. Here's a question. Let's see. When sending files for review in Central, is it possible to send the contents of an entire TOC out for review? You can. You could. I used it from the Content Explorer, but if you want to, you could send them out using the TOC as well. I just was keeping it simple on the Content Explorer. But if you wanted to send everything in a particular book, you could do that. You could also send them. You could also choose to send many topics for review from the Content Explorer from within a folder even. So a couple different ways to send them. I just chose the super easy way, which was what was in focus. So, but yes, good question. A couple different ways to send them out for review. Another question that's come in, can subject matter experts review an internal build? So, and actually view that stage. So at this time, unfortunately, that's a great question and a great feature suggestion. We only authors can see those internal builds. So that is something that we've heard. It's a suggestion we have. There's something that we're looking at. So we'll certainly get you added to that feature suggestion on your behalf. But at this time, only folks invited as authors can review those internal builds, those private builds. All right, so I'll keep this questions panel open in just a moment. I am going to just throw my email address up here so you have it. Want to thank all of you for joining today. So oops, for some reason my thank you text isn't showing up. There should be some text that says thank you there. So there's my name, there's my email. If you have any feedback on today's webinar, any questions that you're thinking of that you forgot to ask live, feel free to send them my way. We'd be happy to get back to you. But I really want to thank all of you for attending today and joining. I hope you found this useful. And we'd love to get your feedback and questions if you have any that come up after the fact. Oh, one other topic or one other question's just come in before we wrap. Can SMEs add images to the review topics? Another great question and a great feature suggestion. It's actually something that we're researching. At this time, we can't add images into our review files, but it's something that we're looking at, and I hope that my answer in the future is a little different than it is today, but it's a fantastic suggestion, and I'll be sure to get you added to that feature as well. You could add a comment around some text to let your author know that a different image should go in there, but at this time we can't add in a fresh new image into the review package. So hopefully we'll see that functionality in the near future. So again, thanks everybody for your time today. Thanks for joining. We have another webinar coming up in August with a wonderful trainer and educator, Neil Perlin. We hope to see you on there. There's details on the site, some tips for taking your skills to the next level. So we hope to see you on that one. Thanks everybody for joining. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. Take care.